You know, after 30 years of delivering babies, I thought I had seen every possible version of a pregnancy story. The easy ones, the hard ones, the ones that break your heart, and the ones that feel like pure magic. But there is one case that still sits in my chest like it happened yesterday, and I want to tell you about her. Because sometimes, just when you think medicine has all the answers, a mother and her baby show you that they don't. I remember walking into room 214 on a Tuesday morning. The sun was coming through those ugly hospital blinds, and there was a woman sitting on the edge of the bed. Her name was Sophie. She was 34 years old, an elementary school teacher, and she was expecting her first baby, a daughter. She had come in the night before because her water had broken unexpectedly. That happens sometimes. But when I looked at her chart and then at the ultrasound images, my stomach dropped. There was no fluid, not low fluid, not a small pocket somewhere hidden behind the baby's back. Nothing. Zero measurable amniotic fluid around that unborn child. I have seen a lot of PPROM cases in my career. Premature rupture of membranes. Usually there is at least some fluid left. A little cushion. A little hope. But Sophie's ultrasound was completely dark except for her baby girl, curled up tight, her little arms folded against her chest. The medical textbooks will tell you that without fluid, the lungs cannot develop. The cord gets compressed. The baby essentially suffocates in the womb, or comes out unable to take a single breath. I looked at Sophie. She looked at me, and I had to decide what to say next. I could give her the statistics. I could prepare her for the worst. But there was something in the way she was holding her belly that made me pause. She wasn't panicking. She was waiting. And honestly, so was I. The truth is, I walked into that room ready to tell a family goodbye, but Sophie had other plans. She just didn't tell me yet. I remember sitting down across from Sophie, pulling that little rolling stool close to her bed. Her husband David was standing by the window, his arms crossed tight against his chest. The kind of stance men take when they're trying to be strong but their knuckles are white. I had the ultrasound images printed out on the clipboard. I also had the statistics memorized. And I hated every single one of them. I told Sophie the truth. That's always been my rule. I said her water had broken completely. At 30 weeks, a baby's lungs are still developing the surface tension they need to expand with air. That development depends on the baby breathing fluid in and out of those lungs inside the womb. Without fluid, that process stops. I told her about the risk of cord compression, about infection, about how most babies in this situation are delivered within 48 hours because the womb becomes too dangerous. Sophie listened. She didn't cry. She didn't interrupt me. She just put her hand on top of her belly and waited until I finished. Then she asked me a question I had never heard before in 27 years of practice. She said, "Dr. Matthews, what if she's ready anyway?" I didn't know how to answer that. Ready? Medically, that didn't make sense. You can't be ready for air if your lungs haven't been practicing. I opened my mouth to explain the physiology again. But Sophie held up her hand. Very gently. She wasn't being rude. She was being certain. "I've felt her practice breathing for weeks," Sophie said. "Little hiccups. Rhythmic movements. I know what I felt." David looked at me with desperate eyes. He wanted me to fix this. He wanted me to tell him his wife and daughter would be fine. I couldn't do that. But I also couldn't look at Sophie and tell her she was wrong about her own body. So I did something I rarely do. I picked up the ultrasound wand again. And I said, "Show me what you mean." I squeezed the cool gel onto Sophie's belly and watched the screen flicker to life. Immediately, I could see the problem. A normal ultrasound at 30 weeks shows the baby floating in a dark lake of fluid. The head moves easily. The limbs float. There's space. But Hannah, that's what they had already named her, was pressed tight against the uterine wall. Her little spine was curved like a comma. Her knees were tucked up to her chin. And everywhere I moved the wand, the screen stayed dark. No fluid packets. No cushion. Just baby and wall. I pointed to the umbilical cord. It was wrapped once around Hannah's thigh and then ran straight down. compressed between her body and the uterus. I showed Sophie how every time Hannah moved, the cord flattened slightly. I told her this was my biggest fear. Without fluid, the cord gets squeezed. Blood flow slows. Oxygen drops. Sometimes the baby makes it. Sometimes they don't. But Sophie wasn't looking at the cord. She was looking at Hannah's chest. "Do you see that?" she whispered. I followed her gaze. And then I saw it. Hannah's chest was moving. Small rhythmic, subtle movements. Like breathing. Except there was no fluid to breathe. Medically, this shouldn't have been visible. Fetal breathing movements happen in the 3rd trimester, yes. But they require fluid to move in and out of the airways. Without fluid, the chest wall should have been still. Flat. Silent. I adjusted the wand and zoomed in. The movements continued. Gentle. Consistent. Almost like a meditation. David grabbed Sophie's hand. "Is that normal?" he asked. I couldn't say yes. I couldn't say no. I had been doing this long enough to know when medicine didn't have an answer. But I also noticed something else. Hannah's hands were moving to her mouth. She was sucking her thumb. A baby in distress doesn't suck her thumb. A baby running out of oxygen doesn't look peaceful. I looked at Sophie. She looked at me. And for the first time that morning, I wondered if I was the one who didn't understand what was happening. The hospital protocol was very clear. When a patient presents with complete fluid loss after membrane rupture, we induce labor within 24 to 48 hours maximum. The risk of infection doubles every day the baby stays inside. The risk of cord accident triples. I had the protocol memorized. I had followed it hundreds of times. But Sophie looked at me and asked for something I couldn't find in any medical manual. She asked for 48 hours. Just 2 days. She wanted to drink fluids, rest on her left side, and see if her body could produce more amniotic fluid. She had read somewhere that the membranes can sometimes reseal, that fluid can regenerate. The studies on this were almost non-existent. The success rate was below 5%. But Sophie didn't care about the success rate. She cared about the feeling she had when she saw Hannah's chest moving on that ultrasound. David pulled me into the hallway. His voice was low and shaking. "Is she being unreasonable? Should I make her listen to you?" I looked at that man. A husband who was terrified of losing his wife and his daughter in the same week. And I told him the truth. I said, "Your wife is not being unreasonable. She's being a mother. And I don't have the right to take that away from her, unless I'm certain she's wrong." So we made a deal. 48 hours of strict bed rest. 4 liters of water a day. Temperature checks every 4 hours. And a non-stress test every 12 hours to monitor Hannah's heart rate. If anything changed, fever, contractions, decelerations, we would move to induction immediately. The first night passed in silence. I checked on Sophie at midnight. She was awake, staring at the ceiling, her hand resting on her belly. No fever. No contractions. Hannah's heartbeat was strong and steady on the monitor. 140 beats per minute. Perfect variability. A healthy baby who had no business being healthy. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the ultrasound in my head. The chest movements. The thumb sucking. The calm. I had been a doctor long enough to trust data. But Sophie was asking me to trust something else. And the scariest part was, I was starting to. On the morning of day 3, I walked into room 214 and saw the numbers on Sophie's chart that every obstetrician dreads. Temperature, 100.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Not a high fever. Not yet. But it was trending up. Her white blood cell count had climbed overnight. And there was a faint odor that I noticed the moment I opened the door. Not strong. Just a whisper of something wrong. The infection had started. Chorioamnionitis. That's the medical name for it. An infection of the amniotic sac and fluid. Once it begins, it spreads fast. To the baby's lungs. To the mother's bloodstream. To the uterus itself. In severe cases, it leads to sepsis within hours. I had seen mothers go from mild fever to intensive care in less than 12 hours. I had seen babies born with pneumonia because the infection reached them before delivery. I sat down next to Sophie and took her hand. Her skin was warm. Too warm. "Sweetheart," I said, "we can't wait anymore. The infection is here. We need to deliver Hannah today." Sophie looked at me. Her eyes were glassy from the fever, but her voice was clear. "Can we do one more ultrasound first?" I wanted to say no. Every minute we delayed increased the risk. But there was something about the way she asked. Not demanding. Not bargaining. Just needing to see her daughter one more time before everything changed. I picked up the wand. The gel was cold on her hot belly. And when the screen flickered to life, I froze. The fluid was still gone. That hadn't changed. But Hannah was different. Her chest movements were stronger now. More pronounced. I could see her diaphragm contracting. Her little ribs expanding. And her heart rate was 148 beats per minute. Strong. Reactive. Completely perfect. I looked at the monitor. I looked at Sophie. I looked at David, who was crying silently by the bed. "Her lungs are moving," I whispered. "I don't know how, but they're moving." Sophie smiled through her fever. "I told you," she said. "She's practicing." I made a decision in that moment that could have cost me my license. I decided to give Sophie 4 more hours. Not 48. 4. Just enough time to see if the fever would break or if Hannah would give us a sign. It was the longest 4 hours of my career. The fever didn't break. By 10 o'clock that night, Sophie's temperature had climbed to 101.8. I had started her on broad-spectrum antibiotics through and 4, but I knew the medicine was buying us hours, not days. The infection was moving faster than the drugs could chase it. I told Sophie we would start induction at midnight. She nodded. She didn't fight me anymore. I think she knew her body was losing the battle. But then something unexpected happened. Before we could place the induction medication, Sophie's body made its own decision. At 11:15, she sat up in bed with a sharp gasp. Her eyes went wide. "Contraction," she said. "That was a real one." I looked at the monitor. Sure enough, a perfect uterine contraction peaked at 60 millimeters of mercury. Then another came 7 minutes later. Then another after 5 minutes. Sophie's body was going into labor on its own. No medication needed. I had seen this happen before with PPROM patients. Sometimes the empty uterus recognizes that the pregnancy is ending and decides to empty itself. But here was the problem. Without fluid, every single contraction was dangerous. I explained it to David while Sophie breathed through the waves of pain. Normally, the amniotic fluid acts like a cushion. When the uterus squeezes, the fluid distributes the pressure evenly around the baby. It protects the umbilical cord from being crushed. Without that cushion, every contraction pressed Hannah's body directly against the uterine wall, and the cord was trapped between them. I positioned Sophie on her left side, then on her right, then on her hands and knees. Each position shifted Hannah slightly, gave the cord a few millimeters of space. But the contractions were getting stronger, closer together, for minutes apart. Then 3. At 2 in the morning, I was standing by the monitor when the sound changed. The steady whoosh 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 of Hannah's heartbeat stuttered, then slowed, then disappeared. For 7 seconds, there was nothing but silence in that room. David screamed. Sophie went pale. And I reached for the emergency button, my hand shaking, my mind racing through every possible way to save that baby before it was too late. My finger was hovering over the emergency call button when the monitor beeped again. Once. Twice. Then a rhythm. Hannah's heart rate came back. 130 beats per minute. Then 135. Then 140. It wasn't as strong as before. The variability was decreased. But she was alive. She was still there. I pulled my hand back and took a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. David was crying into Sophie's shoulder. Sophie had her eyes closed, her lips moving silently. Praying, I think. Or maybe just talking to Hannah. At that moment, I couldn't tell the difference. But I knew we had to make a decision. And fast. The cord had compressed completely for 7 seconds. Next time it could be 10 seconds. 15. Or it might not come back at all. The standard of care was clear. Emergency C-section now. Get the baby out before the next deceleration. But here was the terrible truth I had to say out loud. Hannah's lungs had been developing without fluid for 4 days. We had no idea if they would work. None. If I did a C-section and Hannah couldn't breathe on her own, the NICU team would try. They would intubate her. They would put her on a ventilator. But at 30 weeks, with no fluid history, the chances of severe respiratory failure were above 70%. I had seen babies in that situation survive. I had also seen them suffer. I looked at Sophie. "We need to do a C-section now," I said. "It's the safest way to get her out before the cord collapses again." Sophie shook her head. Her voice was barely a whisper. "No kutin. I need to push. She needs to feel me push her out." David started to argue. I started to argue. But Sophie opened her eyes and looked at me with a certainty that stopped both of us. "She came back, Dr. Matthews. Her heart came back. She's telling us she's not done fighting. Don't cut her out before she gets her chance to try." I had 2 hours left on my shift. I made a decision that I knew my colleagues would question. I told the nurses to prepare the delivery room. No C-section. Not yet. We would let Sophie push. And if Hannah's heart dropped again, we would run to the operating room. 2 hours. That's all I gave them. 2 hours to prove that a miracle was possible. Sophie's body took over in a way I had rarely witnessed. The contractions came every 2 minutes now. Strong. Relentless. She didn't scream. She growled. Low and deep. Like something primal had awakened inside her. David held one leg. A nurse held the other. And I sat at the foot of the bed, my gloved hands ready, my heart pounding harder than it had in years. But I was terrified. Every textbook I had ever read warned against vaginal delivery with complete fluid loss. Without that cushion, the umbilical cord can prolapse, slip past the baby and get crushed completely. The baby's head can mold unevenly against the uterine wall, causing brain bleeds. The shoulders can get stuck because there's no fluid to help rotate the baby into position. I had seen all of these complications. I knew the statistics by heart. Sophie didn't care about the statistics. "Push," I said when the next contraction hit. She bore down. Her face turned red. Her veins stood out on her neck. And I could see Hannah's head beginning to descend. But something was wrong. The shape was different. Without fluid to surround her, Hannah's skull was being pressed directly against Sophie's pelvic bone. I could feel the edges of the baby's sutures, the soft spots where the skull bones hadn't fused yet. They were overlapping, molding in a way I had only seen in prolonged, difficult labors. "Stop pushing," I said. "Let her stretch you slowly." Sophie stopped. She panted, tears mixed with sweat on her cheeks. "Is she okay?" she begged. "Is my baby okay?" I looked at the monitor. Hannah's heart rate was still there, still fighting, 142 beats per minute. But every contraction caused a small dip. Not a crash, just a warning. The cord was being squeezed a little more each time. "Keep going," I told Sophie. "But slow, gentle. Let your body open for her." The next contraction came. Sophie pushed again, but softer this time. I watched Hannah's head emerge millimeter by millimeter. The cord was wrapped once around the neck, loose, thank God. I slipped my finger under it and lifted it over Hannah's head. The baby's face was purple. Not blue. Purple. A sign of venous congestion from the cord compression. One more push. The head was out. Then the shoulders. Then, in a rush of blood and exhaustion, Hannah Grace slid into my hands at 3:47 in the morning. She was limp. She was silent. And the clock started ticking in my head. I placed Hannah on the warm towel across Sophie's belly. The cord was still pulsing, weakly but pulsing. That meant blood was still moving, still delivering oxygen. But the baby's body was limp. Her arms hung heavy at her sides. Her legs didn't kick. Her face was the color of a bruised plum. And her chest wasn't moving. The NICU team was beside me in an instant. 2 respiratory therapists, a neonatologist, and 2 nurses. They had the warmer ready, the suction, the bag valve mask, the intubation equipment, everything we needed to save a baby who couldn't breathe on her own. I rubbed Hannah's back with a warm towel. Firm strokes. The way you wake up a sleepy newborn. Nothing. I flicked the bottom of her foot. That usually gets a cry. Hannah's foot twitched, but her mouth stayed closed. Her chest stayed still. Suction, I said quietly. The respiratory therapist cleared her airway. A tiny amount of mucus came out. No fluid. There was never any fluid. Sophie was reaching down, her fingers brushing Hannah's back. Come on, baby, she whispered. Come on. You practiced. I felt you. You practiced so hard. I looked at the clock. 10 seconds had passed since delivery. In medical terms, that's not long. But when a baby is purple and limp, 10 seconds feels like 10 years. The neonatologist was moving closer, the bag mask ready. One more breath without intervention, and she would take over. Then Hannah's left hand moved. It was small. Just a twitch. Her fingers curled into a fist, then relaxed. Her chest hitched. Once. A tiny gasp that barely moved air. Then another. Her color began to change, from purple to deep red, then from red to pink. It started at her chest and spread outward like someone was pouring life into her from the inside. And then she cried. Not a weak cry. Not a whimper. A full, loud, furious scream that filled the delivery room and made every single person stop moving. I have been delivering babies for 3 decades. I have heard thousands of first cries. But that one broke me. I felt tears running down my face before I even realized I was crying. David collapsed against the bed. Sophie lifted Hannah to her chest and held her there, sobbing, laughing, saying her name over and over. Hannah kept crying, kept breathing, kept proving that every single medical textbook in that hospital had been wrong. I sat in the doctor's lounge the next morning with a cup of cold coffee and a stack of medical journals spread out in front of me. I had pulled every article I could find on PPROM, on fetal lung development, on cases where complete fluid loss resulted in favorable outcomes. The literature was thin, almost non-existent. Most studies concluded that less than 2% of babies survive without significant respiratory morbidity when fluid is absent for more than 72 hours before delivery. Hannah had gone 4 days, 120 hours, and she was breathing room air within 6 hours of delivery. I called colleagues at 3 teaching hospitals. I sent them the ultrasound images, the monitor strips, the delivery notes. Each one asked me the same question. Are you sure the fluid was completely gone? Yes, I was sure. I had done the ultrasounds myself. I had measured every possible angle. There were no hidden pockets. No scheduled reservas. Hannah had been floating in nothing but her own determination for nearly a week. The neonatologist ran every test she could think of. Lung function studies, chest x-rays, blood gas analyses. Hannah's lungs were small for her gestational age. That was expected. But the surface tension was normal. The alveoli were opening and closing the way they should. The surfactant levels were adequate. By every measurable standard, Hannah's lungs looked like they belonged to a 34-week-old. Not a 30-week-old who had lost her fluid cushion a month too early. Sophie was discharged 5 days later. Before she left, she sat in my office with Hannah sleeping in her arms. David was there too, still pale, still shaking his head like he couldn't believe any of it was real. I told you she was practicing, Sophie said. Those movements I felt. Those rhythmic hiccups. She wasn't just moving. She was getting ready. I couldn't argue with her. I didn't want to. For 30 years, I had explained pregnancy to patients using science, statistics, certainties. But Sophie and Hannah taught me that there is a space between what medicine can explain and what mothers can feel. And sometimes, that space is where the miracles live. A few months later, I ran into Sophie at the grocery store. Hannah was 6 months old, sitting in the cart, chubby cheeks, bright eyes. And when I put my stethoscope to her chest, her lungs sounded clear and strong. Perfect. After 30 years of delivering babies, I have learned that medicine is not the opposite of miracles. Medicine is the container that holds them until we understand them. Sophie and Hannah stayed with me not because I couldn't explain what happened, but because I had to sit in the mystery of it for weeks before I could find any peace. And you know what I realized? That's okay. We don't have to understand everything right away to show up for it. I think about that ultrasound sometimes. The dark screen. No fluid. Just a tiny baby girl moving her chest like she knew something the rest of us didn't. Sophie never doubted what she felt. Not for 1 second. And that kind of certainty doesn't come from denial. It comes from paying attention. From knowing your child so deeply that even when every machine and every expert tells you to be afraid, you still trust what your body knows is true. I have delivered thousands of babies since Hannah. Some with easy stories. Some with hard ones. But I carry her with me into every delivery room. She reminds me that the mother is not just a patient. She is the first person to meet that baby. She hears things no ultrasound can detect. She feels things no textbook can predict. So here is what I want you to take from this. Trust your doctors. We study hard and we care deeply. But also trust yourself. If you feel something different, if you sense something the tests aren't catching, speak up. Ask for another look. Wait for another opinion. Because sometimes the miracle doesn't come from the medicine. It comes from a mother who refused to stop believing that her baby was ready. Hannah is 7 years old now. Healthy. Loud. Full of laughter. Sophie sends me a photo every year on her birthday. And every year, I look at that girl and I think the same thing. She was ready. Long before any of us were.